Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bauer Connection broadcast. My name is Bobby Umar, and I'm here every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays to talk about personal branding, leadership, professional development, thought leadership, and topics that appeal to me, but also bringing some great speakers like my friend David Kincaid. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Bobby.
So, thank you for coming. And to all of you who are new to this broadcast, the Power of Connection is all about talking to some amazing leaders to talk about how to connect with your audiences, connect with your employees, connect with your colleagues, connect with your bosses. And we talk about connection as a means to better our professional lives and also a bit of our personal lives as well. And, we love to hear you. So, a big part of what we're trying to do is we're trying to get into having conversations. So we want you guys to answer questions. And the topic today is about how brands deal with crisis. And again, David is a fantastic expert, which he will talk about shortly. He's a fantastic expert in branding, and he's got a great book, The Value of a Promise Consistently Kept, which is a fantastic. I love it because it's very much aligned with what I talk about when it comes to personal branding, in terms of personal branding, your promise. So that's great. So if you are here, first off, please let us know where you're from. Are you from North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia? Ask questions. What are your questions about dealing with this current COVID crisis? And what are your questions around dealing with a crisis? What are your questions with how a brand works and how a brand deals with the crisis? If you like what you're hearing, then make sure you can like, clap, heart, light bulb, thoughtful face. You can also tag people during the conversation. You can also share some of your own pages and bring people to this conversation, because I'm expecting to have an amazing conversation with David because he knows the stuff. It looks like already we have Sohail. Hello, Sohail Yusuf from Tunisia. Awesome. So people from all over the world are tuning in. That is great. So why don't we start, actually, David? Tell everyone here a little bit about your story, kind of where you're from and how you came to be, and then we can get into the dive into the topic.
Sure, by all means. Well, I am what I call myself a registered brandaholic. I've been honored to be able to work around some of the world's greatest brands for over 35 years now. And I'm in no way trying to compare this crisis that I'm going to talk to you about versus the one that we're all going through right now. But it's interesting, my personal story and how I ended up in branding was almost a bit of a crisis because as I was leaving school, I was headed to law school. So I'd been accepted. I was already down the path heading to law school here in Canada. And I had the chance meeting with an organization back then called General Foods, strong packaged goods marketer back in the late 70s, early 80s, who offered me a training role, an opportunity to come in and learn about brand management. And I had my own personal crisis because I was hell-bent on becoming a lawyer, and then this opportunity came around, and thank God it did. The reason I tell the story is, again, not to compare it in any way to what the world is going through, but just to say, you know what, in all bad, sometimes you just have to ride it out and good comes from it. And I do believe good will come from everything that we are learning. Things like what you're doing, Bobby, by getting people, the fact that our first guest is from Tunisia, sharing some of the insight. Well, that's kind of what I had to go through. I had to learn a whole new world, call it the business world. And I let myself just kind of immerse in it. And that led me into a very strong training program at General Foods, where I really learned about what brands were. And I must say, I went in and had my eyes opened. I just assumed if I was going in to run a brand, I was going in to do their advertising or design their packaging or, maybe do a bit of consumer research. And what I quickly had shown to me is that, no, that's marketing. And the job wasn't a marketing manager, it was a brand management manager. And I scratched my head at the time going, what have I got myself into? But in hindsight, now 35 years later, what it did was really inject into me a perspective about truly what a brand was. And a brand is an asset. It is something that carries value, financial value, reputational value, social value. Some of the examples we'll talk about in today's discussion, but managing that asset, managing all elements of that brand's business system, its processes, its structure, its people, it's how decisions were made, how resources were allocated, how priorities were determined, all with the goal of creating value. And you showed the cover of the book. In fact, that is my definition of a brand. It is the value of a promise that you're making in the marketplace that you consistently keep. And easy to do maybe for one person, but when you've got an organization of 10,000 or 100,000 employees, like some of these large global brands, coordinating 100,000 people is not an easy task. And that is really where I gained this perspective about a brand being something bigger than its marketing. And after I did that, I ended up having the opportunity to learn and kind of cut my chops on some great global brands like American Express, a big brewery here in Canada called Labatt that eventually went global, Interbrew, which had brands like Stella Artois, and worked with some friends and helped start up an entertainment, a digital and media entertainment organization here in Canada, called Chorus Entertainment, and then doing all of that before starting Level 5. And the reason I chose to start Level 5 was through all of that experience, what I had come to understand, or at least observe, was how the marketplace in general, especially the business community, had really lost sight of what that definition of a brand was. And we could go on forever about why that happened. I don't think we want to spend our time on that today, but they really, brands suddenly went from being assets that grew value for people into being budgets, marketing, that people managed and cut most of the time. Right. So the whole idea of looking and trying to re-ingest this notion of brand management into the business community in North America was something that I found to be quite compelling, and that's why I started Level 5 Strategy about 20 years ago now.
And you know what's interesting is that having done, I'm doing a lot of these broadcasts that I'm doing now. I've booked people and speakers for in the next, this month and next month. But because of the COVID crisis, we've transitioned to talking about this because everyone's talking about it. And, when you have so much uncertainty and you have an overwhelm of knowledge, information that's out there, whether it's good or bad information, and then also trying to deal with the fact that how do I make more money or how do I deal with my kids? Like you may have seen the kids in the background of the videos because they're here. I mean, they're home with us for a couple of months now, and so we have to figure that out, And so we've shifted. Luckily, what you talk about is helpful to that. So what I want to do is I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. And there's already two people already asked questions, but before I get into the question, and there's tons of people now, like George from Greece, and let's see, we have Abdurrahman from Qatar, and London, UK, Elizabeth from London, UK. Christopher is here, Sajid Kumar is here. So people are asking questions. But why don't we first, and actually before I even dive into it, I have never seen anything like this before in my lifetime. So I just want to get feel from you, like how are you personally seeing this? I mean, before we get into the expertise of the brand stuff, but how's this personally affecting you?
Well, it's difficult. Like you, I've lived through my ups and downs in the business world. They called it a financial crisis in 2008. Right. Those of us that are old enough to remember will remember paying 25 to 28% rates on your mortgage in the early 80s. Yeah. So, we've gone through these types of crises, but in each case, they were linked, I would say, primarily to a financial definition of the crisis, this extends so much broader and further than a financial crisis. The financial crisis is the fallout of a much larger humanitarian and health crisis that is affecting the whole world, not just one or two markets. So just the scale and the impact of this is much broader than anything that I've ever experienced. I do feel like certain countries are investing and trying to get out ahead. I would say Canada is doing a decent job. Still bothers me to see a bunch of university students, hanging out at parties, but but I would say, we're doing a pretty good job of getting out ahead of it. And as a result, the social distancing, the quarantining and the isolation, it gets lonely. We're social creatures by nature, and especially in the world that I've lived in for all of my career, it's a very social industry. And
that's why we're doing this, because they now call it physical distancing, but social, it's not really so, because we're social here now together online. So that's
exactly. And so I think that the impact of this crisis on all of us, doesn't matter what sector you work in or what your age or your ethnicity, it's affecting a much broader swath of humanity, and that's got me a little concerned. But I guess the point for maybe where you're going with the discussion, it's when you get into these times of crisis that are as large and far-reaching as the one we're in, it really calls for great leadership, and it puts a premium on great leadership. And, while I see our elected officials trying to provide that leadership, I'm seeing it take place on the street, neighbors checking in on elderly neighbors who might need assistance. That's leadership. I mean, you're breaking your habits, and you're doing something that's reaching out to others. And I think, if you look into the world of brands, there are certain brands that have always acted as leaders and continue to act as leaders. And it's encouraging to see some stepping up, truly act as leaders, not just purveyors of products and services. And I think that just talks to the ability of the brand, this notion of how you manage that brand, and also the people that are behind leading that brand.
And I love what you said about leadership, because I've always said too in a lot of my keynotes and speeches, which of course now are being canceled, but when I go out there and we used to go out there and speak, I would talk about leadership being it's not just about the big things. It's not like you raise $1 million for a charity. It could be just that's helping that person get across the street. It's about stepping up and being of service. Yeah. And and that's really a big part of leadership. So seeing that, we definitely see that. I think that's great. So here we are now, dealing with this COVID crisis, and I think a lot of people they're going through a lot, and they're trying to manage it, and they're trying to process. So let's get into the topic about how brands deal with this type of crisis. What are some of your insights into this?
Well,
excuse me.
If you go back to what we just talked about around, it's great to see certain brands stepping up and truly acting as leaders. I guess the advantage that I've had, and that my teammates at Level 5 have had, is we've had the opportunity to work with over 350 brands around the world, all with the goal of trying to make them leaders. And one of the steps involved in that process is truly getting that organization, the leadership of that organization, to focus, articulate, and align around a purpose. What business are we in? Why do we exist? And then a vision and a mission. Where are we trying to take this business? And then a clear articulation of the values of that organization as we proceed along against that vision and along that that mission, with our purpose in mind, how will we act? How will we treat others? What do we value? What maybe don't we value as much? And that step, I must say, we've always viewed as a foundational, a critical part, an element of building out a strong brand. Without a strong foundation, you can't build a 70-story skyscraper. So that foundational element, and I think, you know, and I'm in no way trying to throw anybody under a bus here, but I think when times are going well, that step in the exercise is often, I'm not going to say overlooked because we force them to do it, but whether people truly see the importance or the value in it, and involving the whole leadership team in it. You know, you'll get people kind of nodding, and they'll sit in a workshop and we'll get something articulated. And by a show of hands, yes, we all support it. And then sometimes it ends up on a plaque hanging in the lobby of your office. And that's not leadership. That's running an exercise and getting something done. Truly stepping back and asking yourself these fundamental, foundational, strategic questions we put a real premium on. We've got special ways that we help people articulate those things and involve them. But I would still say you get certain individuals across our clients who would go, okay, good, I know we had to do it, but now let's move on to the more meaty, how do we make money, and what are we going to produce, and what are we going to create? And it's times like this that really put a premium on having done that step properly.
Right.
I'm watching companies, just large brands just here in Toronto, and I'm sure our guests have seen it in their local markets as well, where there are certain brands, organizations stepping forward and reprioritizing and saying that the reason that we want to convert our manufacturing facility into something that creates ventilators or medical and surgical equipment, it takes them away from their regular line of business, or it adapts the way they currently are doing business, like a lot of the grocery stores here in Canada, having specific hours for seniors so that they have use of the store, you packing your own groceries so that you don't have people touching food. I mean, suddenly those things aren't being asked of the branded business system because they're nice to do. It's because it truly reflects behavior that links back to the values of that and the purpose of that organization. Mm-hmm. And so I would encourage companies, owners of brands, or creators of brands, I would encourage them to put a premium right now on that step of stepping back and just asking, really, what is our purpose? What is our mission and vision? And importantly, what are the values that we want our organization to live by? Because it's those values that we're seeing that are providing the leadership right now.
And I concur, because, values is something that, a lot of organizations, especially the big ones, talk about, and they have it. You're right. It's plastered on the wall somewhere by the refrigerator. But do they actually live those values? Do they actually activate those values in a meaningful way? Because just because it's on the wall doesn't mean you actually have it. And yeah, exactly. I know a lot of people in the workplace are like, okay, we value this, but do they? Do they really? And so I think that when we get down to it, I mean, this is a chance for you to really dive deep and say, yeah, are we living our values? Are we activating our values? And, are our values going to be something that we are going to use for our employees, for our teams, for our followers, and our customers? So I think that's great. And people are commenting, which is great. Chris is saying, I like what your guest Bobby is saying here. That's great. Glad to hear. There's a couple of questions too. So I'm here with David Kincaid. He is a brand expert. He's authored the book, The Value of a Promise Consistently Kept. He's also the founder of Level 5 Strategy Consulting. and he's sharing stuff on how brands deal with the crisis. And so I'm grateful he's here. If you are joining us, ask questions, tag people. Let's get the conversation going. We already have 2 questions. Let me get to the first one by Sajid Kumar, who's one of my regulars. So I just want to give him props for being a regular on my show. He says, actually, I'm gonna do him second. Let's go back. Let's go to Chris's question first, because I think it's a very important one, or a standard one. How do we make a brand unique in an ever so changing world? That's a very broad question, but I'll give that one to you.
Well, it is a very broad question, especially in a world that's changing by the hour. It's interesting. We at our firm, we've learned to adapt very quickly through technology. We had an all-employee meeting yesterday, and we actually asked ourselves that question: what is it that we could be doing now while everyone is in their lockdown periods to help prepare organizations and better equip them for the world that we will all enter into, which we will. Mm-hmm. When? I guess your guess is as good as mine, but within 2 to 3 to 4 months, things will start to return to normal. And one of the interesting comments that a couple of our folks made, and I think it links back to the question that Christopher's asking, is it's hard to truly define or create, let alone deliver, a meaningful point of difference in a marketplace if you don't really know what the unmet needs are of that marketplace. Mm-hmm. And I would say even as recently as 2 weeks ago, people probably felt like they had a pretty good finger on the pulse of the markets that they serve, right, and what those needs might have been. Sitting here 2 weeks later, I think everything's changed. And when we come out of this, everything will have changed. People will live differently. As consumers, they will value different things in different ways. So to answer Christopher's question, I think to truly be able to, in this unfolding world, understand what that need or that opportunity is to create differentiation means having an absolute saturation in your understanding of the changing needs of your marketplace. And often those needs, as we discovered, even in good times, people have a very difficult time articulating. And that's because, and again, we can get into it if people are interested, but we've helped a research company create a tool, a capability that's actually gone in and looked at how people make decisions to try something, buy more of that, to become loyal to that brand. And on average, a minimum of 50% of what drives those decisions are emotional attributes. Right. In the development of that understanding, what we also came to learn, quantitatively, I might add, is that that's all fine and good, but that assumes people, humans, male, female, of all ethnicities, that they can actually articulate their emotional needs. And what we discovered is that is not true. They have a very difficult time in articulating emotional needs. They'll give you, I need to trust you. I need to feel self-confident in you. I need, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not belittling those, but that's the tip of an iceberg. What we found in the development of this tool was that males all around the world, on average, could articulate about 10 emotions, truly articulate them.
Sorry, how many are there?
Women could get to 14, so call it a draw at 12 for most humans. In terms of, if you simply ask them, name all the emotions that Apple or Tesla, or pick a great global brand today, what are the emotions that it stirs in you?
Right.
You might get to 12. Well, in fact, neurologically, every human being has 96.
Right.
So you're getting a very small subsample of these emotional drivers. And therefore, if they can't articulate the emotion, they can't actually tell you what the need is. Well, I would argue that what we're going through with this crisis, yes, there's a number of rational elements to it. It's a virus, for God's sake. It's a science that will solve it and put it into management. But it's got a huge emotional impact of what we're all going through. So to go out and ask these people, what are those emotions that have changed in you as you approach the purchase of your favorite product or service? One, it'll be different than it was even a month ago. Two, if you ask them that question open-ended, they can't actually tell you. Right. And what they do tell you is what they will say is the same for just about every other product and service. So you're trying to differentiate amongst a small little subset of emotional drivers that most people can get to in terms of articulating, but the real things that are sitting in the back of their mind and driving their emotions, their feelings, they can't articulate. So you really got to get in and understand that marketplace in order to determine what that point of differentiation is on an unmet need, and acknowledge the fact that that unmet need is going to be different 2 or 3 months from now than it was 2 weeks ago.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And, it's fascinating to see that people are unable to express as many emotions as that do exist. I find that fascinating. And that now I'm constantly reminding of myself in terms of what emotions do I express or say that I express? Because now, do I ever get past 10 or 12? I don't even know. So I'll have to be more mindful of that. We have people are asking lots of questions, which is great. So let me get to an earlier question. Sajid Kumar says, how do small businesses brand themselves during a crisis, keeping in mind the scarce resources at hand?
Great question, because I'm looking out the window and I'm watching it right in front of me. The reason it's such a great question is when you are in lockdown, which many of us are, that small business across the street that might still be open, providing, food or pharmaceutical or medical supplies, those are the businesses that you will turn to, because the large retailers are either closed or you have to travel to. So right. Those smaller businesses really become, I would call it the spine and the nerve center of your local community. And one of the things that I think is happening, I'd love to hear from others around the world, whether they're seeing it too, but those small local businesses are suddenly your go-to, not only for the product or service that you're going to buy from them, but it's because there's a person there, right? And you're talking to that store owner, hopefully in the right social
distance. Yeah, exactly.
Right? But we all kind of want to connect. We want to stay connected. So that local business, I think, has this window as an opportunity when people are by habit or by need favoring smaller businesses, local businesses. They really do have an opportunity to establish their brand. Don't just be a store that sells fruit and vegetables. Understand what the needs of that local community are. Yes, you might sell fruits and vegetables, but what could be at the DNA of your brand in your local community is this emotional understanding of what your community is going through and what it needs to be able to stay together. And if you start to represent that, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for small to medium-sized businesses that unfortunately is coming out of this crisis. But it really does, I would just use the word community, and closeness and connection. Understand what those attributes are that make you special within your community and build your brand around that.
Although I will challenge you in one part there, David, because I mean you're referring to the ones that are locally open, and that's a good question to the audience. Like, if any of the audience, if you can share, what are some of the local businesses that are your go-to where you are in lockdown or self isolating? Let us know where you're at and where you actually go to. Like my go-to, the only place I go to right now is I go to the local metro that's downtown. That's it. That's the only place I go, and then I come back just for groceries and things like that. But let us know where that is. But I think the question was more around the ones who can't stay open, right? So
Great
businesses
point.
that can't stay open, and so how can they leverage, or how can they deal with their brands or reprioritize their brands in this type of crisis? And I think that leads to another question, which was from Elizabeth Floyd, where she says, what about the crisis for the self-employed consultant and personal branding? Do you see they should be doing things differently from the big brands?
In terms of the strategic steps to go through to understand what is at the DNA of your personal brand, if you're an entrepreneur or a sole proprietor, I don't think the steps are any different than if you were a larger organization. What comes out of as answers to the questions, I think obviously will be different. And the one advantage that a sole proprietor would have is you really have as high a level of control over what those values are and how you want to live them, demonstrate them to your clients, your customers. So in some ways, you've actually got tighter control over your brand than an organization with 100,000 people scattered across the globe.
Right.
So I don't think the process is any different. It really just comes down to you taking the time. And when we are stuck in our homes, maybe now is a wonderful time. It's a perfect time to step back and ask yourself these questions when business as normal isn't normal. You can't do what you usually do over the course of a business day. So ask yourself these questions, and you might find that you come to some interesting new insights from the past, or new insights as a result of this experience about what your brand and its value proposition needs to be rooted in going forward.
I agree with you. I think that this is a perfect time for us to revisit the groundwork beneath our brands and our businesses, and even how we live our lives. I mean, I'm looking at my apartment, and we're looking at doing some personal projects to get ourselves organized in our place, because it's not perfectly organized. And same with your business brands. You can start to organize and do some background work, some research, and do that groundwork that's going to help build a foundation for your brand. I think that's really great.
Yeah,
so great.
And Bobby, yeah. Just something I want to just
please.
On the previous question, you've raised a very, very good point, or our guest did. It's one thing to talk about the brands in the local community that are open versus those that are closed. It is a very good point, and mine tended to be more on the former, so apologies there. But I'm even finding those small to medium businesses that are closed, the one thing they are doing is reaching out and communicating to their client base, to people within the community whom they may never have talked to before, simply to say, in the face of the Corona-19 virus, here's what we are doing to maintain our commitment to you, our quality, the delivery of and the confidence you should have in us to deliver in the face of all this, so that they're managing expectations. The worst thing that a small or medium-sized business that is closed right now, the worst thing they could do is stop communicating.
Totally agree, because the best brands have a strong community, and it's funny, everyone's complaining about, I'm getting all these emails about the virus, but at the same time, the brands who are doing it, it's better they're doing it than not doing it, and having communicating and reassuring and showing their commitments. I think that's really great, and so I appreciate that comment. There's a lot of comments, guys, so everyone's sharing some great information here. So let me just go through. So Christopher says, the premium of repurposing active values for a brand, that's a powerful statement. Johnny Lloyd says, adding value is key for me as a consultant to stay connected and thrive. Joanne also says it's a perfect time for us to dive deep. Elizabeth says, I agree. This is an amazing time for this type of thinking. Whenever do we get this time? So this is the time to do it.
So true.
Another question from Christopher. Do you think some businesses will slowly convert to offering products and services online, replacing their brick and mortar due to current climate in the marketplace?
You know what? That I've been watching the news. You know, why do I need to get on an airplane to fly to wherever to New York for a meeting with 5 people in the future when I've learned through Zoom or MS Teams how to have that meeting?
Yeah.
Right? You know, by the way, I'm helping the environment and the carbon footprint by not getting on an airplane. So, look, I mean, humans, consumers, to some degree, will always be creatures of habit. But the thing that makes them interesting, and it's why brand management and marketing is such a fascinating sector, is, as we said earlier, people are going to change. So do I see current businesses completely shifting to an e-commerce platform and away from a bricks and mortar? Yeah, I could see that happening. I don't think you're going to find that's going to happen 4 months from now when we get back out into living somewhat of a normal life. But I think we're all learning. And again, part of great brand management is you never stop learning. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, something like this happens and your assumptions change. Mm-hmm. So I think what will happen, most definitely, is organizations have had to adapt, not learn to adapt, but they've had to adapt to be able to stay in business when we're faced with these kinds of circumstances. So if they are creatures of habit, they've learned new ways of communicating and of sharing and of working together collaboratively in a more virtual manner. So I think all organizations are those that might have been somewhat closed-minded to applying or leveraging technology to its fullest, the old, and we've all experienced it, working with people, we've done it this way forever and it's working really well, so why change anything? Those people aren't going to have much of a leg to stand on going forward because we've all had to adapt. So those organizations that might have been reticent to evolving their business platform, I think are going to be much more open-minded. But I don't think we're going to find a whole-scale shift when we come out of this. I don't think the world's airlines are all going to go out of business. I don't think the cruise ship business is going to disappear. I think it will be delivered differently with a clear understanding of what those unmet needs are that they need to reflect in how they deliver their value proposition. But I don't see the world just up and changing completely overnight. But they'll just be more open to evolving.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that some of the switching to online is temporary. I mean, even for myself, I'm losing. I'll be very frank. I'm losing a lot of speaking gigs because events are being canceled. I got a cancellation yesterday, and some are canceling, some are shifting. So they shifted me to 2021. So I have to wait a whole year before I get paid for delivering on that speaking, the keynote that I'm doing. So that's a big shift for me. So I'm definitely shifting to online stuff. So I'm not focused on online coaching, consulting, my online programs that I have on personal branding and public speaking and TEDx talks and things like that. But when things get back to the real world again, and we're going back on the marketplace, no, I will be ready to hit the ground running. And that's another thing that I want to point out is that there's an opportunity here. Yes, do the groundwork, but at the same time, when the world is getting back on its feet and we're allowed to go outside and play again and run around, you need to be ready to hit the ground running and get out there, because I think some people are not doing that. They're hunkering down and they're like, oh my gosh, and like, oh, what am I doing? Okay, and I'm trying to build my business. And then when finally the veil is lifted and we're going to get out there, some of them are not going to be ready to hit the ground running. I think that's an important piece to understand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you talk about your speaking engagements. In addition to my work at Level 5, I also teach at 2 business schools here in Toronto. Right. And one of those business schools proactively offered a training session, or a number of training sessions, to the professors, all in how to use technology to for breakouts, for lectures, for adding in additional discussion rooms or opportunities for students to collaborate. And many of these professors have taught at the front of a classroom or a lecture hall for many, many years. But the school is taking advantage of this opportunity to say, yes, but you need to do it differently right now because the school is closed. But think about going forward. Those professors now might start to incorporate this capability into their regular curriculum or their delivery of that curriculum going forward. Right. And they've been introduced to it.
Mm-hmm.
No, the glass half full.
Yeah, no, good point. Good point. So some more comments here. Johnny Lloyd says, community is critical, and maybe telling your customers your why you started. This could help the customer stay connected and help you tell your story, which is great. I think that's a great idea. Another question from Chris, and he's all capsing it, so this must be very important to him. So what businesses do you think are viable to secure now versus 3 months ago?
Well, I hate to say it, but we're using it right now.
Yeah, it's like online tools, video platforms.
Yeah, anybody that went out and bought some stock in Microsoft because of Teams or Zoom or these technologies that allow for sharing, connection, and decision making going forward, those are, I think you're going to see share price rise. I was interested listening to the chairman of FedEx just 2 days ago from their headquarters saying that their business, they are dedicating a certain number of their flights to ensuring that the medical equipment that is needed, much needed, is prioritized and is sent to the appropriate marketplaces. Right. But he was also pushed and asked, well, how's your business doing? And he said they can't keep up with it. My daughter's boyfriend is in the air cargo business. Stuff still has to get moved, shipped, right. Often by air. But if the airlines are minimized or closed down completely, these are all businesses that otherwise you might not have considered. So I think any of these industries that, like an Amazon, who facilitates or enables connection, not delivery. Anybody can deliver something, yeah. But I really need this equipment to get from point A to point B to retool my factory. Well, okay, then FedEx or whoever, an Amazon, might suddenly become more important. So people that facilitate or enable connection, technology would be another big area that I think is going to continue. And medical innovation breakthrough is obviously, exactly. We need a cure to this fast.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, so if anyone who's still watching the broadcast, and thanks for joining us, you can certainly ask questions. You can tag David or myself afterwards, and the replay is available for you to watch. There's still a bunch of people on the call, which is great. I'm glad to have you guys there. What is a good place for people to contact you or get in touch with you, David? Online.
I'm furiously following my email right now. And that email is Kincaid. So DKINCAID at level 5, the number 5. So at level5strategy.com.
He's an email guy, people. So make sure you send him an email. And I think a question you can tag him. And why don't you tell us more? I mean, maybe you can tell people about your book, since I have to copy your book, but maybe tell people about your book a little bit.
Yeah,
I love it.
Well, it's interesting because a student in one of my classes this past year said, "Well, what's the hardest part about writing a book?"
Right.
And I thought about it for a minute, and then I wasn't trying to be flippant with my answer. I was actually being quite serious. I said, starting it.
Yes, it is the hardest part. I totally agree.
Putting pen to paper or typing or whatever. You can carry it all up here, but if it doesn't come out somehow, it's not a book. Yes, that book, Value of a Promise Consistently Kept. I like to tell people it's a series of anecdotes. It's meant to be a quick read. It is more my observations over the course of my career. 2 or 3 examples of where maybe I got it right, working with others, and here's what right looked like. But there's an awful lot of examples and stories about where I got it wrong. This is a world, especially right now, of trial and error. And for somebody who's going to be a lawyer to get into this business world, I made a lot of mistakes. But out of the mistakes comes the learning. And what I've tried to do in that book is say my learning, my mistakes, and a couple of my hits all got me to that simple definition of what a brand was, so that we were able to get people understanding that it's not your marketing. Don't confuse brand management or a brand with the brand's marketing.
Yeah.
You have to market a brand, but those are different concepts. And that it really is a book that is, like I say, about stories of these hits and misses that got me to finally being able to articulate the definition of a brand in as simple a term as possible. So that's that book. If you don't mind, I will take advantage of the opportunity to plug.
Please listen. And Chris just said, Bobby did it again. You provided more added value. The whole reason I have this broadcast and have people like you, David, on the show is to provide value to people out there. So I'm grateful for your time. And so yes, if there's something else you want to plug, please do.
Well, yeah, I've got a new book that is about to come out, being published by University of Toronto Press, and it's a different book. It's called The Brand Driven CEO, and it's about in your world leadership, and with this new definition and understanding of what a brand is. What I try to do through a lot of research. This isn't a bunch of personal anecdotes. This is the result of 2.5 years of research, looking at brands whose share value and reputational value would be in the top 10%, and the growth. And I went in and looked at the leadership of how those brands were actually managed. And I started to see some interesting patterns emerge. And I'll let you read the book to find out what they all are. But the one thing that I did learn is that in just about all of those organizations, the ultimate brand manager, the brand leader, is the CEO or the owner of that company. Jeff Bezos will tell you he runs the Amazon brand.
Right.
I don't know whether you've been watching, and for our guests outside of Canada, the name Loblaws might not mean anything, but it's one of Canada's largest grocery chains. Every 3 days, its CEO, Galen Weston, has been communicating with its very large customer base, and keeping them informed of what that organization is doing to deal with this current crisis. So it's not passed off to the marketing department to do. This is coming from the desk of the CEO.
Yeah.
So the book really does talk about the urgent need for senior leadership to own the core elements of brand management in their organization. So that new book, I got good news from the publisher yesterday that despite everyone working from home, because of the publishing industry, everything's continuing on schedule because it's all digital. So that book hopefully will be coming out mid-summer, this coming summer. So look for it, The Brand-Driven CEO.
And Christopher also asked, where can I retrieve David's book? So where can you get this book, and where can you get your new book? Is it on Amazon? Where can you get it from?
You can get the first book, The Value of a Promise Consistently Kept, is you can find on Amazon. And then the new book will be available through the publisher and will be available at all major bookstores.
Okay, excellent. Well, I appreciate your time, and so thank you for joining me, David. Really appreciate your time, and hope you stay safe and stay home and help everyone navigate through this challenging and really surreal time. I feel like we're in a movie sometimes. It's kind of odd, but I do thank you for your time for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you to all of your guests for listening in and participating.
Yeah, and if you're coming in, guys, I'm usually broadcasting Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at around 8:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time around the Power of Connection, and talking about thought leadership and business and personal branding and public speaking and things like that. On Friday, this forthcoming Friday, this Friday morning, I'm speaking with Ginger. She's also really she's going to talk about resilience. And then on Monday, I'm speaking to Julie Cole, who's the founder of Mabel's Labels. That one's going to be actually at 11:45 a.m. around lunchtime. So join us then, and have a safe and fruitful week of reflection and groundwork building and looking through your brands. And again, David, thanks so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, my pleasure. Everyone, take care.